Welcome to Talking Synths, Episode 7, or Numero Siete for those who speak the Spanish language. Allows me to show off my Spanish skills. Today, let's start off with more on oscillators. We started back a couple episodes ago on oscillators. We kicked in a little more last episode, and now, who was it? Francois Rossignol has asked a really interesting question. What about wavetable versus transwaves? And that can be the subject of a lot of discussion.
as we found out today.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure we had all our P's and Q's together, so we made some notes, and the deeper we dive, the more things we
uncovered and
felt we needed to dive into.
Yeah.
So I have a VFX SD here from Ensoniq. This is going to illustrate transwaves. So that's on the complicated end of the spectrum. Let's start on the easy end of the spectrum and work our way through all the way to transwaves. So easy end of the spectrum, analog monosynth. You have a switch that says sawtooth, square, triangle, or sine wave. That's easy. You get a waveform that is just, and last time I did this, I had those drawn right on my shirt, and I didn't even realize it. I don't have that same shirt on today, but basically you're generating a single cycle of a geometric waveform, and that just repeats and repeats, and you get a static sound from that. So that's...
And kind of like how we talked in our last podcast, you're in the analog sense, your oscillators are always oscillating.
Yes.
And so I always kind of liken that to your heart. I like to say your heart is an oscillator the size of a fist. That's the way I like to think of it, because your heart's always beating.
Hopefully.
Oh yeah, hopefully.
Okay, so that's the very simplest. And then we get into the realm of what Francois is asking. All right, wavetable synths. What came after the basic synthesizers that generated geometric single cycle waves? You had things starting to come into the realm like the Ensoniq ESQ1. I pull that in because it's one I'm familiar with, but it was a wavetable synth. And what it basically had is a wavetable of 32 different waves that you could choose from. And if you think of that in terms of like a mini Moog or something, imagine a mini Moog that instead of selecting that sawtooth and square and whatever, now you have a 32 position switch where you can select piano wave or
Bell's real famous.
It also had the standard analog wave, square, sine, but now you have like a piano wave that you could use to make synthesized sounds. And those waveforms loop, even though they're much more complicated. So you can loop those waveforms and sustain notes, and you can use the ESQ1 to make a sort of passable piano sound.
And I think, with that, we can also talk about some of the advantages of having that digital sound source, of course, is increased polyphony and tuning stability.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And certainly a much broader range of timbres to draw from in sound design. Okay, so that's what I've always considered a wavetable synth, one where you just go in and you select what wave you want from a big list, from a wavetable. Now in researching this, one of the kind of murky water places that we got into was different people have referred to a wavetable as different things, and that kind of takes us, well, let's not go there yet. I'm going to come back to that. The next level in this sort of hierarchy was Korg came out with the wave station. Is that right? Wave station, yes. Yeah. I don't want to get mixed up and say wave state. It was the wave station where you have a wavetable and you have all, say you have the 32 waves in the ESQ1, for instance. What the wave station allowed you to do was play the first wave and then butt right up against that, play the second wave, then the third wave, just play them all in sequence. Yeah. So you get this crazy, disjointed,
kind of jarring.
Yeah, just a sequence of each of the waves. I can't sing it, but you get the idea that it's just this crazy sequence of disjointed sounds. And so that was called wave sequencing. that led into vector synthesis, which I think you could sort of do some of this on the wave station as well. But now let's think of the Prophet VS. The Prophet VS gives you a joystick, and you can use that joystick to basically crossfade between four different waves that are playing. So imagine you have a piano wave and a sine wave and a complicated digital wave and whatever. You can sit there and sustain a note, and with that joystick you can crossfade between all those, and you can change the timbre as you go. And of course you have all your modulators, so you can set up an LFO to sweep between this one and that one. And
I've always been intrigued by the idea of the vector envelope. You know, an envelope that occurs on a, I guess, what is it, 4-dimensional plane or 3-dimensional? But yeah,
like Star Trek.
Yeah, yeah. But so actually sweeping through with a non-traditional ADSR. I don't know, that just kind of blows my mind. I think it's a really neat idea.
So in other words, you're using the envelope to modulate the vector?
Where the joystick is located on that plane.
So if you have an envelope that goes zzz, you can maybe think of it as going piano, now we're fading into sine wave, now we're cross-fading into square wave or whatever. Yeah, so
and I think a lot of this, what this gets used for, is long evolving pads.
Exactly.
It's kind of like the bread and butter of vector synthesis.
Yeah. So yeah, so we're moving from static waves to really sounds that have a lot of animation and stuff. Yeah. And so that leads us next to back to wavetables, but now in the realm of what PPG called wavetables. And this is not necessarily in chronological order, because PPG did this back before the wave station and whatever. So now let's imagine a wavetable. I guess they can be disjointed waves, and in the case of the PPG, a lot of them were disjointed waves. But let's imagine a wavetable of 32 waves, and now you can sweep between those waves like the wave sequencing we talked about, where it just played them one after the other. But now imagine that you can use an LFO or something, and you start with wave 2 and you sweep to wave 7 and then back to wave 2. That's kind of what the PPG stuff allowed you to do. And it did it in it was revolutionary for the time, but yet it was still a little cumbersome in the fact that those waves, when they were unrelated, you get a lot of noise when you're switching from this wave to that wave.
Clicks and pops.
Yeah.
And aliasing in the lower registers.
Yeah. So it's a little bit clunky.
Yeah.
But as we know, clunky can be kind of cool too. And so you get this crazy assortment of sounds, and it's just changing and sweeping. And that's what kind of gave the PPG waves, wave being the name of the product, that's what gave them the character.
Well, and the analog filters, of course, to help kind of tame some of that aliasing and the clicks and pops and just add that character. Yeah. Which, coincidentally, is what I love about the Quantum, is those analog filters just absolutely kill it.
So yeah, we can talk about the Quantum and Iridium coming up, because they're in this food chain as well. Okay, so now PPG called that a wavetable, and that was different from what I think of as a wavetable, where it's just one wave that you choose. PPG's wavetable is a set of waves that you choose. And I guess in the PPG keyboards, you could select between lots of different sets of these waves. So now let's move on to Ensoniq and their Transwaves. The Transwave is kind of the same thing as the PPG, only the waves are very highly tailored to being able to sweep through them without those clicks and pops and aliasing.
And keeping the correct phase,
I
think is a large portion of that.
Keeping everything just right. That was the result of a lot of software development, and that for the most part was done by Bill Mauchly at Ensoniq. If anyone has heard of the Waveboy series of discs that you could put in your EPS-16 and ASR-10, Bill Mauchly is Waveboy. He was a full-time employee at Ensoniq, and he did Waveboy products on the side. But while he was at Ensoniq, he developed the software and a system for making these Transwaves. And so what that is I think there were 128 steps or something in a Transwave, and you would start with a waveform that was, whatever, sine wave, and then on the other end of it, let's say you go to a square wave, and then he would make interpolations, 128 interpolations of that wave as you went through it, each of them, one tiny step closer, and all of them phased exactly right, trimmed exactly right, the exact right length and everything to where they could be swept through click-free and all.
Yeah, so I think a lot of what we're talking about is, things that were really pushing those technological boundaries. You know, even when you think of the PPG, ROM and RAM were things that weren't very cheap at the time. Yeah. So a lot of their characteristics comes from how they were efficient with the technology that was available at the time. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if this is true, but I had read online that in the FSMO, the wavetables are actually generated through additive synthesis, through additive sine waves. And I don't know if there's any truth to that, but if any of you guys out there know, please let me know in the comments, because I think that would be pretty cool.
I think the FSMO waves were just the same technology as the VFX stuff, mm-hmm. which, maybe some of that was generated by additive synthesis as they were created, but I don't think the FSMO itself is doing additive synthesis while you play it. It's a wavetable synthesizer, so it's looking this stuff mm-hmm. up. And all these wavetables, like you say, were stored in ROM. That was a big difference between, from taking stuff from analog synthesizers to digital waveforms in the first wavetable synths, was that ROM was available to store these things. Mm-hmm. So let's see. I have a wave set up in here in the VFX. I've created this to where it's just a bare bones sound, and I'm just playing one voice with the wave called Dr. X, which sounds, I don't know, Dr. X sounds evil. But I'll just play it. So that's the static wave, and you're looping on one cycle of the waveform. And then I've set up the mod wheel to sweep through that transwave. I'll give you an idea of what this is going to sound like from playing it, and then I'm going to yap on some more about the basics of it. So that is one wave in the wavetable of this synthesizer, but that wave itself is a transwave, and so it's like it's its own wavetable. Mm-hmm. A transwave is its own wavetable within a wavetable synthesizer, if you will. This gets kind of crazy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
All right, so this is a printout from the Ensoniq VFX SD manual, and it basically shows a multi-cycle wave, and this is what is in, like, Dr. X, for instance. This is what it would look like, but one cycle of that wave is all you're hearing, one single cycle. And so what you can do with the mod wheel is you can move that around and play different portions of the wave. So that's what we're hearing when I do this. And the beauty of this is that you can not only do it with the mod wheel, but you can use an envelope to modulate that, you can use an LFO to modulate that, you can use key pressure to modulate that. So there are a lot of different ways to add that motion to your sound. And so that's what Bill Mauchly and the Ensoniq crew put together.
And then I always think it's really interesting. Sometimes I'll just kind of hit the keys and scroll through the start position, because even the start position will have an interesting effect on timbre.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I'm doing with the mod wheel, but I can do exactly that. There's just one cycle of the wave, and I'll just scroll through the start. And I could do the same thing with the mod wheel. And you can hear that if there was an LFO modulating that, you'd get the cool animated motion to that sound.
Yeah, and so was that technology also in the TS10 and the TS12?
Yes, and then carried over into the Fismo.
Okay,
cool. I think a little bit of it in the SQ1 series. So, yeah, but the VFX was the one that really capitalized on it and came out first and made it a cool deal. Yeah. And just a few interesting points about Bill Monkley, who invented this, or who created this for Ensoniq. He's a really nice guy. He's, in my mind, a genius. But he ought to be, because his dad was the inventor of the ENIAC computer, like the first computer, the one that took up a whole huge room just to do its computations. And that computer was invented for the defense, United States Defense Department or whatever, and its purpose was to calculate trajectories of artillery and missiles and stuff. So his dad was the inventor of that. His mom was a computer. Okay, so before the ENIAC came along, a room full of computers, they used to have a room full of ladies that would sit there with their slide rules and whatever and do the math to calculate these trajectories.
That's analog.
Yeah. And so they would make these trajectory tables. And his mom was one of those.
Interesting.
One of those ladies. And I guess somewhere in that mix.
The office romance.
Yeah. No, I don't want to speculate. But another cool tie-in is I told my dad this story. And my dad said, I worked on the ENIAC once or twice or whatever. And I'm like, what? And yeah, my dad was in the Army back in the 50s, and he did some work with guided missile systems and whatever. And at some point, they did some of their work on the ENIAC computer. So that was a crazy tie-in that I didn't expect.
Interesting.
Yeah, so. Anyway, Bill is a very interesting guy and a very nice guy, and obviously a very bright guy. Transwaves can be done on the ASR-10, and in fact, that's what Bill's Waveboy disc does. We spent, back in the days when Syntaur was a sound design company, we tried to do our own transwaves on the ASR-10, and you just can't do it without getting pops and clicks. And even with we were using Alchemy's sound design software and stuff, and making sure loop points were just right, and doing everything we could. And we could get really close, but you'd still get a little grit when you swept through them. And so, yeah, we didn't have the software or the talent that Bill had for making that work. So,
and what's the story behind? Because I know we get calls every so often about hidden waves. Is that on the SQ80?
Yeah, that's something completely different. But basically, on the ESQ1, what we did was we purposely crashed the operating system. We fed in sound data that was so crazy that it crashed the operating system, and then you could sweep through, or where it would normally look to the wavetable to see these 32 waves, it was thrown so far out of range that it was looking at wave 214. It was, you know, kind of the nomenclature it used, and it wasn't really finding waveforms. I mean, obviously what it was doing was just going to some crazy place in the OS code, and just the binary data at that point would make it sound like or whatever. And so most of it was useless. Most of it was just static, noisy stuff. But if you if you had more time than anything else, which I did at the time, I could sit there and scroll through each of those waves that it went through, and you'd find some that were musically interesting, or you could do some that sounded like wave sequencing.
Interesting.
So, yeah. So crazy fun back in the day.
Yeah, that's awesome. I always love hearing stories about that, or just how limitations and technology can create new sounds.
Yeah. That was a fun period of kind of pushing the boundaries.
Yeah.
Now, you've got in front of you a Waldorf Iridium, which is very akin to the Waldorf Quantum, and it does the same sort of thing as the Transwaves now, because you have a wavetable in there that you can kind of scroll through or modulate through.
Yeah, and what I really like about the Iridium and the Quantum is just obviously with newer technology, you now have the ability to have a graphic display that's really representative of where you're at, where your starting position is, and how it's being modulated. And the other thing that I really enjoy about wavetable synthesis is just the cool things that people do on an artistic level to create sounds that you wouldn't hear otherwise. So, you know, people will take pictures and convert them to wavetables. I enjoy playing with the UVI Falcon, and so one of the wavetables is actually their logo. And then also the Iridium and the Quantum also both support, I believe it's like a speech-to-text synthesis, which uses some form of wavetable. They get those real vowel and format sounds. I haven't messed with it yet, but I'm pretty excited to get my hands on that.
Yeah. So I guess we can get a close-up of this and punch it in, but you can basically turn a knob and see it sweep through the plane of all the waves. Or not a plane, but a three-dimensional representation of them. So, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, technology.
Yeah. I did want to mention back to the Waveboy stuff. Those discs are still available, and you can get them through chickensystems.com. So they're licensed to distribute the Waveboy stuff now.
Awesome.
So let's move on to some new stuff.
New stuff?
There's some new stuff happening. One thing that caught my eye, caught my ear when you told me Junkie XL selling off all his stuff. So
most of his stuff.
Yeah,
most of his stuff.
So I clicked on and listened to the reasoning, but
you know what? I think it is amazing when someone is that passionate about music and sound design that they're willing to give up a portion of their collection when they realize that it's not being used to its fullest potential to give the next generation a start.
Yeah, and just a little background, Junkie XL is Tom Holkenberg, who did soundtrack music.
He's done, I mean, his resume is absolutely insane. If you have a chance, I'd recommend, check out his channel, read his Wikipedia. He has an amazing repertoire.
And so as a result of his successful endeavors, he collected equipment back from the days when he was 12, before he was successful at doing this stuff. He collected equipment for years and years and years and amassed a huge amount. And yeah, I thought it was very cool. He got to a point where he thought, all this stuff is really cool and I love it dearly, but it doesn't get the love because there's so much of it that, why aren't I using this? Well, it's because I don't have time because I'm using that. And like you say, he thought, this stuff would be better in the hands of people that are going to use it and cherish it every day.
Yeah, and I also think it's awesome that his gear is very well maintained.
Yeah.
That's something that he does point out, that he's loved on all of it, so he just wants it to go to a good home.
Yeah.
And I think that's also reflective of what we do here.
Yeah,
just loving on instruments and finding them homes. There are a couple of pieces that I'm kind of like, oh, I might go into some debt if they pop up.
I think it's a sale on Reverb coming
up.
Yeah,
it'll be the Junkie XL Reverb store.
Yeah, so
really
that'll be some interesting viewing, if nothing else.
I'm almost more interested also to see what pieces of gear he holds on to.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that'll be very telling.
Yeah. Okay, so let's bravely dive into the other stuff happening. It's fitting that this is part of 2020, isn't it?
Yeah.
The whole year's been like this. Axel Hartman designed the Arturia key step, which you own and love.
I love the key step. I'm not necessarily a great player, but even just being a technician, it has helped me in so many pinches. They really nailed the connectivity on it, having DIN sync, having the CV gate. It really helps me to diagnose issues in keyboards that we have around here. And then you see people making amazing music with it. So to have a tool that is useful across multiple platforms in a compact design and is affordable. And they hit the nail on the head.
And in our CS80 Synth Wizards, you were
DX1.
DX1, yeah.
DX1.
You were playing the DX1 from this little
bitty key step.
Yeah, and so it's this really cool piece of equipment. And what happened?
The Behringer, came out with the swing, and some people have speculated that the swing is the swing that they're taking at Arturia. Let's just be upfront here. Axel Hartmann has contributed a lot to the synthesizer community. He gave us the Alesis Andromeda, the Waldorf Microwave. He even had his own venture with the Neuron, which years later he even released as a free VST. He also worked on Bob Moog with Bob Moog on the Little Fatty.
And we have a sub 25 here, and it's the same kind of design. So here's Axel's designs still coming out and still looking gorgeous. Yeah. And all of a sudden, Uli B.
Yeah, it's almost a one-to-one copy. They've hinted at that there will be, they call it their dirty little secret, but something that'll set it aside or make it different from the key step. But I think at the end of the day, it's a very blatant ripoff.
And I think even the code is the same, isn't it?
I don't know. No, they've said that they've written their own firmware for it, so I won't speculate as to that. But I think the point is Arturia gave to Axel Hartmann. They put their trust in him to design a completely new instrument that has helped tens of thousands of musicians. And Music Tribe is a large company that could easily afford to do their own R&D. And instead of doing that, instead of pushing the envelope, and instead of being pioneers of innovation, they've chosen to take swings at other industry leaders.
And yeah, they're kind of famous for this so far, but maybe not so blatantly.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes. Axel Hartmann did release a statement saying that he was very saddened by it. But is that going to stop him from innovating? Absolutely not.
No, I'm sure not, but it's disheartening.
Yeah, to say the least.
So.
For you guys out there, we don't want to end on a bitter, sour note. If you haven't checked out Synthomania 2020, we're working really hard and getting everything kind of fixed up and putting it in a presentable manner to make it available on YouTube. We had a blast. It was an absolute fun day. It was a little stressful. It's our first time doing a live stream to that degree, so there was a learning curve. Luke knocked it out of the park. The musicians were amazing. We were able to do some really cool giveaways. So we're working really hard to have that available for the Thanksgiving break, because I know when you're sitting around with your family, you're going to want to be on your phone a little bit.
well, some of it's already up. We did a live Talking Synths podcast from there, and so that is episode 6 of Talking Synths, and it's up. And as you know, we put every even-numbered Talking Synths episode on our Patreon page, but since that one was part of Synthomania, it's on Patreon, but it's also on YouTube, and it's live, and it's up now. So yeah, we ended up with a lot of great content from doing Synthomania, and it's going to be up very soon.
Look forward to doing it again next year. If y'all have any suggestions or comments, please feel free to let us know. We're always looking at ways to make this better for you out there who enjoy synthesizers as much as we do.
And we enjoy them a lot.
Yeah. Well, with that,
we'll bid you modulator.